Like we should probably mute, right? Like be on mute the whole time unless we're speaking. But right now we're introducing ourselves. So.
Okay. All right. Looks like the live stream is starting to perk up right now. Looks like I'm seeing it on, and then what I'm going to do is. It's looking good. And share. All right. So I'm going to put this in the chat box right now, so you guys will have that. This is a live feed, so you're welcome to share that on your respective page. So if you when you share that there, that'll actually show up. If someone clicks on that, that'll take them immediately to the live feed that's on YouTube. Right, perfect. Looks like that's working. And I'm going to just need about 2 seconds here. And this part of the video, I will be able to cut out when we do the final version online. So they won't hear me rambling like I am right now. And okay. So. Okie dokie. All righty, we are all set. All right, so let me. Okay, well, I want to thank everyone for joining us today. And one of the first things we're going to do is to have our guests today introduce themselves. I'm excited today. I've been looking forward to this for a few weeks now. The Empire Justice Center is just a wonderful resource for us here in Rochester, New York. And my goal today is very simple: to educate as many people as possible to the value that they bring to our community. And particularly, there's some timely things they're going to talk about today, particularly around child tax credits, that it's going to be very, very important for you to really take some note on. Information shared today is going to be quite a bit, so don't panic. When we're done, this is actually going to be reside permanently on YouTube for you to take a look at later on. Also to share with somebody you believe would benefit from this. The history of this program is pretty simple. Started a year ago. It's meant to be a platform that's open to all, and its intent is to keep alive the importance of equity work within the Rochester community. And so if you think of something that you would like to see on this program, please get a hold of me and let me know. And again, U of R is a huge resource here to our community. It's the #1 employer, and community engagement is extremely important to us. My role at University of Rochester as a director of anti-racism, equity, and community engagement is also to keep on a constant basis looking for ways for us to engage with the community in ways that make a difference. I just want to thank all of my guests for being here today. And so I'm going to go based on who I see in the screen here. I'm going to start with Kristi, then move to Marlene, Ruhi, and then to Barb, and then to Luis. if you could just introduce yourself, and then once the last person is done, we'll have Kristi start out with the beginning of her presentation. So Kristi.
Hi, thank you for having us. I'm Kristi Hughes. I'm the Vice President for Development and Administration at Empire Justice Center. I just celebrated my 20-year anniversary with the organization last week. I was at the U of R before that. And I'm just really excited to let people know more about our amazing organization and the work that we do. So thank you again.
Okay, thank you, Kristi. Okay, Marlene, you're up next.
My name is Marlene Cortes. I am the Senior Manager for the Language Access Program at Empire Justice Center. And the Seeds for Saving program as part of CASH, which is creating access savings and hope, which is a free tax preparation program. I've been in legal services for close to 30 years, and I just dated myself as an age. But my passion here at Empire Justice Center is language access.
Okay, thank you, Marlene. Ruhi, you're up next.
My name is Ruhi Maker, and I'm an attorney at the Empire Justice Center. I've been working there for over 30 years, and my background started as an attorney representing tenants. And since then, I've gone on to doing foreclosure work as well as Community Reinvestment Act work. I co-convened the Greater Rochester Community Reinvestment Coalition with Barb, VanKerkhove, and essentially, starting from the 90s, we have been essentially challenging the banks to serve the LMI, the low and moderate income, and the Black and Brown communities in the Rochester metropolitan statistical area.
Okay, thank you, Ruhi. Barb, you're up next.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Barb VanKerkhove. I am a researcher policy analyst at Empire Justice Center, and I've also been there 20 years this past April. And with Ruhi, we work to essentially, we work with banks and with the regulators of banks to ensure that banks fulfill their obligations in serving all of the communities, particularly low and moderate income and Black and Brown communities. And I do a lot of the data analysis that informs that work.
Okay, thank you, Barb. Appreciate that. Luis, you're up next.
Yes, hello. I'm Luis Ormaechea. I'm a staff attorney with Empire Justice Center's Consumer Finance and Housing Group. My focus is on foreclosure prevention. Among other things, I'm also involved in advocacy related to language access. I've been with the organization for about 2 years, and I'm excited to help homeowners keep their homes, especially during difficult foreclosure processes.
Thank you, Luis. Yversha, you're up next. We're just doing a quick, sort of your name, how long you've been with the organization, and your area that you support, and in anything that's unique you'd like to share around what brought you to this type of work.
Hello, everyone. My name is Yversha Roman. I am the director of CASH and have been with the Empire Justice team for almost 3 months. Excited to be here. I'll be presenting a little bit about the work that CASH is doing throughout the presentation. So I'll wait to talk then because I'll be talking a lot at that point. So thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much. Okay, with that, we're going to dive right in. I think Kristi, you're up next. Okay. All right,
Yeah.
so I'm going to go on mute, and I'll monitor to see if any questions come in. And we have a lot to share, so I'm going to really make sure everybody gets a chance to get their information out, and then you will have more than enough time to be able to handle questions too at the end. Okay, thanks.
Great. Thanks, Kevin. And again, thank you for this opportunity to share more about our organization and our work. I'm just going to start out with a high-level overview of Empire Justice Center and the work that we do. And you'll hear from these presenters in a minute. So who are we and what do we do? We are a nonprofit law firm and advocacy organization. We are statewide, so our largest presence is here in Rochester, but we have 6 offices across the state outside of New York City. We have an office in Albany, on Long Island, Yonkers, White Plains, and then in Rochester, we're located in the Teleska Center for Justice downtown, and our CASH program is located in the public library. So much broader organization than some people think. And we Our mission is to make law work for all New Yorkers, especially those who need its protection the most. And we achieve this mission through 3 areas of service. We say that we teach the law, so our advocates provide training and technical assistance to other lawyers, both public interest and private, to court personnel and to other nonprofit advocates who are trying to help their clients. So we train them and give them technical assistance on the laws and regulations that are facing their clients. We practice the law, so we are a law firm. We provide free civil legal representation to low-income New York families, and we do this in about 30 areas of substantive law, so very broad. And then we change the law. We're a systems change organization. We're registered lobbyists in the state of New York, so we engage in legislative and administrative advocacy. We bring impact litigation to create systems change. And then we are coalition builders. We do a lot of coalition building across the state and here in Rochester. How we work, we like to say we take a 360-degree approach to issues facing low-income families. Our work is centered on clients. So clients are the center of everything. So from the client experience, whether that is through our own direct legal representation, working with clients, or through work with our partners, we learn about the issues they're facing. And we learn about patterns and practices and trends that are happening that we can then address through the legal tools that we have. For example, if we learn that advocates are a little confused about some laws and regulations and they're not sure how to apply those when they're working with clients, our advocates can train and provide technical assistance so that other advocates can better serve their community. If we hear that, people aren't following the law, some entities aren't doing what they're supposed to be doing, and it's a pattern and a practice, we can engage in impact litigation to make sure that they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. And we also, we hear about changes that are needed in policy at the state, local, and federal level. And our advocates, draft legislation and engage in policy work to make sure that there's good policy on issues that are impacting low-income people. So we are a systems change organization. We have all these legal tools available to us that make it a very powerful model. And we do all of this through the lens of racial and economic justice. So that's just a kind of brief overview of who we are and what we do. And I will turn it over to Yversha unless there are questions.
There's one question around, it sounds very powerful here is that, so you're an organization that is in a position that as we come up with potentially inequities within systems that are, that are particularly impacting folks that are, living in systemic poverty, you have the capability to help either create or suggest legislation or changes to legislation that could be helpful in like, for example, I don't know if this would be a good example, but the benefits cliff. So for example, that we hear a lot about where, I do a lot of work with Ormaechea,
Yes.
Rochester Monroe Anti-Poverty Initiative. And one of the barriers to folks becoming more sustainable and to be able to function is that in some cases they turn down jobs that are giving maybe a little bit more pay because it's in that middle range where they make just enough to lose their benefits, but not enough to pay for the services they were getting from the benefits. So is that an example of where you'd be able to sit down with the right folks to craft what modification would be needed to that policy to then offer that up to someone in, at the state or federal level? Does that make sense?
Yes, that's a great example. And I do believe that Susan Antos, who is our senior attorney for public benefits, will be attending an Ormaechea event or meeting soon to talk about this issue. So that's the kind of work exactly that our advocates do. Sometimes, we don't work in the area that people come to us about, but we do have a pretty broad area of poverty law issues that we work on.
All right. And so in a case like that, because that's a real big one, right? Because in a lot of ways, the, folks are not able to make the kind of progress that they really could make, even within jobs that are looking to pay people more. So how difficult it is for that type of a example to really come to fruition. So if I had a magic wand, like how should that work? Where if we say, hey, based on our analysis, we, instead of a cliff, it should be more of a kind of some kind of a transition that as people, make more money, they get a little bit less benefit, but you still have that safety net to help them till they get to the point where they don't need it. How does that actually work to get from that point to where this actually affects a change in that benefit? Like,
so I am not an attorney and I do not do policy advocacy.
Okay.
So I don't know if Ruhi or somebody else on the call wants to answer that.
Hi, so this is Ruhi Maker. I've been here for 30 years, and there are things that I've been advocating for 30 years. And so changing legislation, or it's not just legislation, it's regulation. So we do a lot of regulatory advocacy. So you don't have to actually change the law, you have to change how the law is implemented. So a lot of it is political. It depends on at the federal level. For example, I served on the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau's, Consumer Advisory Board, and there were a lot of things we were just about to get done in 2017, and then it all came to a halt when the personnel changed. But we're gearing up again, and Luis will talk about the language access work he's doing. The benefits. So it's kind of hard to answer your question because we are right now, and I will say for the next 18 months, what I think of as a sweet spot based on who the regulators are, the Senator Schumer's status, what's happening in Albany, and the fact that we have essentially a veto-proof majority in the Assembly and the Senate. And remember, because that's changed, we had a Republican Senate not so long ago. And so it's my view, my plan is to get through everything that I've been working on for 30 years, 5 years, 7 years. In fact, we just changed. So in New York, there was a welfare lien. And if you owned a house, there was a lien. That went away. There was an amount of the car you could own. The price of the car, that number just got changed. So it's a long, complicated, but I think certainly, we're doing this today. It's very packed, but we have many other advocates who work on education, Susan and Kristen Small on benefits, and we can certainly, not in the not so distant future, have that there. The world. So for 30 years, we blamed people not getting ahead on themselves, whereas it's systemic racism, and more white people are beginning to see that and are willing to speak up and fight. Though we also have a lot of pushback, I don't know who's on this event. We can't see who the audience is. No, so it's how do we strategically make change happen without backlash? And we all think very, very carefully about that. Our policy director actually served on the Hill. She worked in Congress for a long time. So, I basically have a view on most of the assembly and most of the New York congressional delegation, what they will vote for and what they won't vote for. So it's a complicated answer.
Well, I really appreciate it.
It can be fast or it can take time. That's what I mean by the sweet spot. And we don't know what we can, right now, we don't know what's going to happen with infrastructure, today, so it's, but what we need is we frankly need white people pushing their elected officials. It's not just enough to have the Black electeds and the brown electeds and the brown and Black advocates speaking up. Sorry to be so blunt about it.
No, well, I think you're raising a good point that really this is really a problem for all of society. So it really needs everyone to be able to really, particularly the folks that are position, power, and agency, to drive this change. And I agree with you. This is really probably the best time we have to drive this change, because I think people are listening with a little bit of a different ear than they did, say, two years ago, even a year ago, right? And so what I'd like to do is that when we get to that point, maybe having that person that you mentioned come on, and we can even dedicate an entire discussion around that. And part of what I'm looking for is if we can really educate folks on what to ask for, what to demand of their elected officials, to say, we want this to happen. Because generally people don't understand what the benefits cliff is doing to really almost entrap people into poverty. It makes it difficult for them to get out. And so once they see that, I believe they'll be much more open to saying, hey, we need to change this policy, and here's why. It may cost more money on one level, but it really will allow folks to really get out of systemic poverty. So I think education is going to be a key part of that. So thank you for that. Kristi, I think you were going to pass it off to someone.
Yversha.
Who's there? Yversha? Okay. All right. Got you. So I'm going to then spotlight you, Yversha, and spotlight for everyone. So then you'll be the one that's on YouTube. Okay.
All right. Thank you so much. That was definitely a great conversation and lead in to what cash does. So as Kristi highlighted, in that graphic that came up before, right in the middle of the work the Empire Justice Center does is direct services. And cash, in who we are, which is the next slide, is we're an initiative of the Empire Justice Center. And what we are is a coalition that was convened by the United Way in 2002. We are made up of human service agencies, banks and credit unions, colleges, local government, IRS, foundations, and nonprofits. And together, what we strive to do is to empower people with the greatest need to obtain financial literacy. One way we do that is by being a part of a national effort. Most people know cash for its VITA site, so the Volunteer Income Tax Assistance site. And this conversation is very timely, considering that today many people woke up and received some money from the IRS that we'll talk about. And what we've done is we've helped to prepare income tax returns through volunteers throughout the years, leading to millions of dollars processed in returns. And our hope is to use the income tax moment to connect individuals to resources in our community. And the makeup of our clients, which is the next slide, are individuals in the greater community. So you can be a city resident or anywhere from Monroe County or outlying towns or suburbs who qualify and make less than $56,000 with dependents or $25,000 filing single. And we really make a concerted effort to target individuals who are eligible for earned income tax credits. And the way that our clients come to us are through self-referrals, but most clients come through word of mouth or are returning clients. On the next way that we serve our clients, I've already mentioned our VITA site. We have, I would say, a safety net program that's called Rock Your Family's Future. And this initiative seeks to ensure that Monroe County residents with children are able to receive free income tax prep and connected to resources to ensure that we can combat adverse childhood experiences together. And then what we do is we help to educate community partners at events like today on specific tax issues. One of them being the monthly child tax credit. So we're going to talk a little bit about the monthly child tax credit and what it is. So next slide. Again, many individuals in our community woke up this morning, checked their bank account like myself, and saw that there was new money in their account. This is because there has been a change to the American Rescue Plan, a temporary change to the 2021 child tax credit rules that should be benefiting about 23 million children in our community. Eligible children must qualify as dependents on your tax return. They must be US citizens, resident aliens with a social security number, have lived with you for 6 months. They can be blood kin, adopted, or court custody, and in your care. One of the things that we really want to make sure that individuals are understanding is the changes to this tax law, right? So Kevin, you mentioned the benefits cliff. And one of the things that we're seeing is that a lot of individuals in our community aren't understanding how the changes to child tax credit affect individuals who are considered low income or no income. So prior to this year, if you didn't make enough money, you weren't necessarily required to file taxes. But the reality is, with this change, in order to receive this benefit, you have had to file your taxes in the last 2 years. And the change has occurred so that families who are low income and no income are now eligible for this tax relief. What does this tax relief look like? In some estimates, this tax relief looks like cutting childhood poverty in our community by half, because families are eligible for up to $300 per kid that are deemed dependents in their households for the next 6 months. As you can see on the graph in front of you, it's either $300 or $250 per child per month based on their age. And you're eligible for $1,800 in monthly payments or $1,500 in monthly payments from July to December. And then when you file your taxes next year, you'll receive the additional payment of $1,800 or $1,500 respectively. But in a nutshell, next slide, one of the things that we really want to make sure that clients, our family, our friends, our community is aware of is that if you have filed your 2019 and 2020 tax returns and the IRS, and nothing has changed since you filed your tax returns. You haven't changed your bank account, you haven't moved, you haven't had another child or a new child. Since then, you should be receiving a payment, if not today, by Monday. We want to make sure that you're setting up your bank accounts, and we understand the reality of doing that. And as Cash, we are here to help families get connected to this resource. So one of the things that families can do with the support of the Cash program is visit the IRS portal, which went active July 1st. That's the next slide. And in order to visit the IRS portal, or you would visit the IRS portal for 2 different situations. One is if you did not file your 2019 or 2020 tax returns, you can go to this portal. What we have seen is that the portals are very difficult to navigate. When you talk about the gap in technology, they're not user friendly. So we are here as an organization to support navigating both of these portals, but anyone can go on the websites and find how they can help make sure they get that connection. Next slide. So in general, one of the things we are, recapping is that automatic payments are nearly for all families. This does not have a ground, if you will. So individuals from $0 to $75,000 are making $75,000 a year filing single qualify for the full credit. And individuals from low income to $150,000 filing single qualify for some of the credit. So what I keep saying is that nearly all families in our community might see some financial relief if they have done their tax returns in the last 2 years. Next slide. Some of the frequently asked questions, that's one of the things that I just mentioned, are the income requirements. And on here you can see, I mentioned single, but for married couples, if you make $150,000 jointly to $400,000, you qualify for some of this tax credit. If individuals have been blessed with a new baby in the last few months, that baby as well and that family qualifies. Next slide, please. These are resources at the IRS or the website for individuals who are seeking online help and support. But locally, what we want individuals to know, next slide, please, is that CASH is here to help. So CASH and the Empire Justice Center are a local resource, or the local resource, to help connect families to this benefit that they are eligible for. We want to make sure that, during a pandemic, people are receiving everything that they're entitled to make sure that our families are thriving through these dollars and not missing out on money that goes unclaimed. So we are here. You can visit our website at cashctc.org, or you can call our number 900-1004 to see how you can get connected to programs like our volunteer income tax assistance that's here to provide free tax prep for previous years, for this year, tax prep, or get connected to our Save for Savings program or our Rock Your Family's Future program to help move individuals towards financial empowerment. And I think there is just one more slide for me. Thank you. And I am here to answer any questions about the child tax credit CASH and all that we have going on to connect people to resources in our community.
Thank you so much. I tell you, much of what you just shared was new to me, so I am blown away. And I suspect people that are watching this too as well. And so, I got to tell you, there's so much more available than I think people realize, and so what's one of the ways, in your opinion, to is there a way for us to get this type of information? This may have already been done before, like through the churches, so church organizations, is there outreach already in that space, or is that an opportunity?
There are definitely opportunities to get this information out. So when I started this position about 3 months ago, I was approached, and as a team, we're approached from a bunch of advocates in the community who said, hey, there's a lot of money coming into our community, and unfortunately, those the most in need are not aware of what's going on. So we welcome the opportunity to send out, and we have information in 6-7 different languages. We really want to get this information out because based on IRS data, there are approximately 4,000 families in the greater Rochester area who currently are not known to the IRS and therefore not going to receive this benefit. And you can only imagine, what kind of impact it will have on them once they do get it.
Yes, and I tell you something else too that occurs to me is that, so I'll follow up with you because I have a potential where there's a number of groups that I sit in on. The Community Collaborative is one. That's run by a number of different smaller agencies, and they in turn touch the very community that we're talking about. And so arming them with information can help them to be an advocate to say, hey, even if you're not aware of this, hey, get a hold of Yversha over at Empire Justice Center. So one of the things that I also heard in the news, and let me know if this makes sense, it sounds like there's a new bill that's being surfaced right now that would take what you just shared around, around the tax credits, child tax credit, and expanding it to look at it, making it maybe more permanent as opposed to just something that's this year. So that could be something where if you're watching this program today and you look at that chart and say, well, I'm not going to get that much of it because I make over, 80,000 or over 70,000 or even over 150,000. I want you to know that for the folks that are making over 100,000+, generally you're in jobs that you have a tremendous amount of agency, position, and power, and access. And so what I would ask for you to do is so that if poverty is important to you and you're praying for people, in fact, maybe you even have a special collection at church for people, what you really need to do is to use your position, power, and agency to drive change. So therefore, if you have access to the folks because of your position that you're in, the power you're in, and where you're in your company, use that to say, listen, I need you to support this bill that's coming up because it's going to allow us to make what we're doing today permanent. And so we can permanently lift people out of poverty, which is going to help our entire community. And so to me, that's something that we can all do to help, no matter who you are. But I just want to thank you for that presentation. I know we have a lot to share, so I want to get to everybody else, but thank you so much. And who's going to be up next?
Thank you so much for having me. When we talk about access to things like the child tax credit, one of the things that we realized was that we needed to continue to have conversations in regards to accessibility. And Marlene Cortes has led the charge when it comes to language access. So she will start to talk about language access and the work that we're doing at Empire Justice to ensure that everyone has the ability to have access points.
Okay, perfect, thank you. All right, Marlene, I'm going to put you on spotlight here, and I'll put you at the spotlight. So do replace spotlight, so that should put you right up front. Okay. All right, thank you.
Can you hear me?
You put the mic a little bit closer to your mouth, that may help.
I'm hoping you can hear me now.
A little bit better. Yeah. Try it now, do a test.
Can you hear me?
No, not as well. So say something else. So testing 1, 2, 3.
Yeah, testing. Can you hear me now?
That's a little better, yes.
Okay, I'll take the headset. It's not working.
Okay.
Well, good afternoon. My name is Marlene Cortes, and I am the Senior Program Manager for the Language Access Program here at Empire Justice Center. And just to give a bit background on how Empire Justice Center got involved in the language access work. A couple of years ago, I was involved in a fair housing roundtable discussion. Many questions in that roundtable came up as who do we go to if we have issues with language barriers, if they go somewhere and they need an interpreter, but they don't have one, and they get turned away because they can't speak English. They can't do the credit report. They get turned down for apartments because they cannot speak English. So that got the ball rolling on our end to figure out, what's out here in Rochester and Monroe County that addresses these language access issues. Being a graduate of the Latino Leadership Program, I reached out to that network and says, is there something here for them? They says, no, but let's have a conversation. This happened in November of 2018. 8 months later, we have the Mobile County Language Access Coalition. They started with 3 members of this coalition after looking into our population here in Mobile County. There is about 60,000 county residents who are limited English proficient, which is IEP, or deaf or hard of hearing that have a language barrier. Part of the Mobile County Language Access Coalition, we recognize ASL as a language, and we include it in our work. Going through this work, we started with 3 members at the table. Fast forward to 2021, we have about 27 organizations at the table advocating and bringing language access issues to the forefront to figure out how we can remove these barriers. COVID happened. And with COVID, it really ripped the Band-Aid of language access and what the barriers were in our community. Folks did not know that we were in a shutdown because information was not provided in a language of a mode of communication that they could understand. People did not know, for example, that the tax deadline was extended because it wasn't provided in information that we could understand. So, I've been pretty busy for the past year with the pandemic, trying to make sure all this information is shared in a format and a method that folks in our community can understand. The Monroe County Language Access Coalition has been very instrumental with bringing language access issues to the forefront and making those aware of the barriers within our community. And it's, at one point you had asked, what can our elected officials do to remove these barriers? And my thing to that is learn what language access is. It's just not interpreting and translation services. It's also culture. It's also, it affects a person's everyday life. The goal of this is to remove these barriers, and part of that was to see we were instrumental in passing the language access bill for the county level. And now we have a language access compliance coordinator at the county level to make sure that all parts of the county are accessible to all Monroe County residents, not only those that can hear or can speak or understand English, because there's a large population in our community that cannot. For you, for example, like you and I can call 911 and not have an issue on telling them we need an emergency. A person with a language barrier, that is not accessible to them. We've had cases where we went to the language access bill where someone said they kept hanging up on me because they thought it was a prank call. They just couldn't speak English. And there was a fire in their head. And she had to call up the person to help her call 911 to fix that, to have someone come out and help her. Another instance we learned where someone in a car was in the middle of their living room and they couldn't communicate with the first responders because they were deaf. And the first responders couldn't communicate with them because they didn't understand that. So there is a sense of responsibility with those in our community of how we can remove these barriers. It just can't be on this population that needs. And also part of our work when it came to the language access bill, this led us to believe what other basic need is not being met within these communities. So we're currently working on a basic needs survey. Can you call 911? If you go to the courthouse, are you able to communicate? Language barriers is life and death for many. And I don't say that lightly. For example, yesterday I was in a call where there's victims of crime. Someone was, this person was not arrested, they were in mental health hygiene arrest, and they put her in an institution, and they said she was, not talking, and she was not responding to any of the meds that she was being, refusing them. It took 3 weeks for them to find out there was a language barrier for her. She wasn't refusing meds, she wasn't competent. She just didn't understand what they were asking of her. And no one took the time to really acknowledge if there was a language barrier, because they said she wasn't responding. And it's because she wasn't understanding what was happening. Language access is a barrier for many in our community that we take for granted. Next one. In New York State, there's 5.5 million New Yorkers that speak a language other than English, but there are 2.5 million that are not proficient in English. That doesn't necessarily mean that they don't speak English at all, but they probably don't speak English well enough to carry a conversation, or don't understand the information being provided to them and to them in English and will prefer it in their preferred language. We have an ethical responsibility and a legal responsibility to provide this information in a format they can understand. We have laws in the books that protect this population, but many don't realize that they have a legal obligation to that. We have the Title VI, and now in the next slide, I will show the Title VI. There's Executive Order 131 of the Civil Rights Act, and that is very specific to language access. Those that receive federal funding have to provide a language access plan and show how they're going to assist clients in these communities. So you can't say, an organization can't say, oh, I'm going to provide all these services to the population, but not have any interpreting and translation services as part of their budget. Then you're not really providing services to a whole population. You're excluding a whole demographic within your own community and causing harm. You need to build trust in these communities. For example, this was, I wasn't part of the organizing of this, but right now, this webinar is not accessible to the deaf community. There's no way to send an interpreter. There's captioning, but for the deaf community, ASL is their first language, and it's a language of symbols. English is their second language. The captioning usually helps for those who have lost their hearing at a later age and don't understand ASL. So part of our work is to promote the building trust. You should have, if you're going to make changes within policy or changes the organization, bring them to the table. Don't speak for them. For many of these folks think that folks with language barriers, I'm like, oh, it's a cognitive issue. No, this person in their country, they were a doctor, and they come into the United States without, due to war in their country. Now they have to learn a new language. It doesn't make them that there's a cognitive issue. There's just a language issue. And we need to address the disparities. You can't say, like I said, it needs to be part of an operating budget. You can't say you're going to serve this population and not have that translation and interpretation services part of your budget. It has to stop being an afterthought. COVID has shown us this, and many who are with language access barriers are within the Black and brown community. So that is another form of racism. That is a fruit of racism, not providing language access to the population that needs it. Next one. And I think we've already covered about the federal, and New York State has an executive order 26. If you go to the New York State website, you will see all those that have to provide language interpreting services. One of the cases that we did here at Empire Justice Center was a DMV case where we worked with them to do a language access plan. If you go to mobilecounty.gov, you'll see the county clerk's DMV language access plan and what to expect when you go to the DMV office. Those who fall under Executive Order 26, there's a whole list of organizations and their language access plan and what you should expect when you walk into a state agency and you need an interpreter. I try to condense this all pretty quick because I know there's others after me and I want to be mindful of that. So I'm going to stop there. One thing is we did do some training language access webinar in the month of May, and over 300 participants attended those training. That was a huge success for us. And we know this is a need in our community and we need to address the needs.
Thank you, Marlene. I have a question. And by the way, I really appreciate that feedback too as well. One of the things that if anybody's listening right now, particularly a company that, oops, can you hear me okay? I'm getting some feedback on my, all right, I'm going to take up one of my earpieces here if that helps. Can you still hear me? Okay, all righty. For some reason, my second earpiece here was getting some noise. Okay, so one of the things that I would like to do is, we have to close the transcript at the bottom, but I appreciate your feedback and us being able to add and having an ASL interpreter. Right now we did, unfortunately, I used to have a staff of 7 during COVID at the University of Rochester. That entire staff is gone. So my budget was cut severely. So I'm actually now a director of 1. So one of the things, if there's any company out there that's watching this that would like to help sponsor, I would love to be able to get some money to be able to help pay for an interpreter to be a part of this. It's only, twice a month. It's 3 hours total for an 1.5 hours. So I would love to have that support. That'd be great. Marlene, I have a question for you. We now have a CDO at the city and the county level. I know one of the things that Dr. Kimball and Dr. Archie are talking about is language access and really how to really improve that, because there's things that I think in the community we thought was already in place and it looks like it's not. And so I think your presentation here really just echoes that. So are you going to be working along with them, or is that an opportunity that we can really try to connect? What are your thoughts on that?
I'm actually working with both.
You are, excellent.
I've worked with Dr. Kimball and Jesus Baez, who is a new language access compliance officer for the county level, but he attends our monthly NECLAC meetings. I do know that the county has been making changes as far as the approach to language access work with county executive fellow when he does his weekly addresses in regards to COVID. That is also done simultaneously in Spanish through YouTube. And that's that shows from the work that we push within the community to make sure that the information is provided in another format. I'm also working with Dr. Archie. I serve on the Disability Digital Accessibility Task Force, which is we're putting together the ways to educate the community in providing interpreting services and language access for the deaf community members. The name of that initiative is called Just Ask Us, and that should be rolling out sometime in September.
All right, perfect. So question for you: if there's a agency, a small agency that doesn't have a lot of resources but needs help in this area, can they reach out to the Empire Justice Center to either to help connect the dots and finding out how they can maybe get additional resources? Is that a fair request?
At this point, we are looking for funding to expand this program. I am at high demand, so we need to put myself in full for the language access program, but there's also lep.gov. It's a great resource for community members. They can go on there. It explains the language access plan. The Department of Justice also has language access information on their website, which is what I would direct them to anyway. The Department of Justice should not also be seen as an adversary. They also will help those who receive federal dollars to figure out the best method of a language access plan. It explains what a language access plan is. It explains to them if you're limited on funds, how to do a language access plan. And we also do the webinars that we did with Empire Justice Center will soon be online. And we're trying to work with our website provider to provide those on our website for community members.
All right, thank you. Thank you so much. All righty, so who is up next? So Luis?
Well, it's me, it's Luis. As I indicated earlier, I'm a staff attorney that works in the Consumer Finance and Housing Group with Empire Justice Center. So we'll discuss a bit about foreclosure prevention and the work that we do. So according to a recent report by the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, also known as the CFPB, during COVID-19, during the pandemic, the number of borrowers who are behind on their mortgage has increased to a level not seen since the height of the Great Recession in 2010. So the CFPB is the agency in the United States government that's responsible for consumer protection in the financial sector. Among other things, CFPB's jurisdiction includes banks, credit unions, mortgage servicing operations, foreclosure relief services, and other financial companies that are operating in the United States. Millions of mortgage borrowers have taken advantage of forbearance programs that permit them to temporarily stop making mortgage payments. And then hundreds of thousands more were delinquent on their mortgages and did not obtain a forbearance, even though it was readily available to most borrowers who reported COVID-19 related hardship. About 1 in 20 loans remain in forbearance currently. And in addition, as of March 2021, many loans were reported as more than 30 days delinquent and not in forbearance. According to CFPB survey data, Black and Hispanic homeowners were more than 2 times as likely as white homeowners to be behind on their mortgage payments as of December of 2020. So here there's concerns regarding equity. The focus of Empire Justice Center in this area ties with our mission to make the law work for all New Yorkers, especially for those who need its protections the most. Stable communities and neighborhoods are the cornerstone to life in New York State. And Empire Justice Center provides direct representation to homeowners at risk of losing their homes to mortgage foreclosures in Rochester. We also oversee the statewide network of legal services organizations that provide such services. We engage in policy advocacy on issues that affect the financial well-being of New Yorkers, such as mortgage servicing and foreclosure processes. And we also work to level the playing field for all New Yorkers by monitoring and influencing how banks and other financial institutions invest in localities through the Federal Community Reinvestment Act and through the Home Mortgage Disclosure Act. Sometimes potential clients reach out to us directly. However, the majority of the clients that we represent in foreclosure prevention matters come to us from several referral sources. So there's housing counselors with organizations such as the Housing Council at Pathstone. We also get referrals from Consumer Credit Counseling Services of Rochester. And then we also work closely with our Teleska legal service partners. The housing counselors will work with homeowners to resolve issues with delinquent payments or other foreclosure related matters. And they'll make referrals to us at Empire Justice Center when it's appropriate, when the case is before a judge, or there's some other legal issues that we should be involved in. We also receive referrals from the New York State Attorney General. Their office is one of our main funders, and from other sources. In a typical case, we represent homeowners through the foreclosure process where the client wants to keep their house. This will generally include a process in court known as a settlement conference, during which the foreclosure essentially is on hold while the homeowner and the lender attempt to renegotiate terms for the mortgage. This is something that became law after the foreclosure issues back in 2009, 2010 at the Great Recession. The process may last many months while the homeowner submits an application for a loan modification or other relief, and while the bank reviews the application, and then while trial payments are made under a new plan, if such a plan is accepted. After the trial process, in good case scenario, we may have a permanent modification plan in place that's affordable to the homeowner. So often if the homeowner makes these successful trial payments and is offered the permanent loan modification with these terms, these allow the homeowner to stay in their home. And there is sometimes delays in the process because of misunderstandings or errors. For example, there could be miscommunications regarding the documents that the homeowner must submit to the lender to get a modification plan. So it helps to have an attorney to provide advice, advocacy, and also guidance through the process. Now, in some cases, it's not possible to obtain a satisfactory loan modification or another alternative option to allow the homeowner to keep the house, but the homeowner still has a better chance of reaching a desired outcome with an attorney on the homeowner's side. So this is often very valued assistance that's provided to the homeowners. Moreover, we're funded through grants, and so this is done at no direct cost to the homeowner. Which obviously at a time where the homeowner is struggling with a foreclosure process or risk of losing their home, there's often other issues involved that may have led up to the foreclosure, sometimes job loss, sometimes a health issue. So, the fact that we can offer this at no cost, direct cost to the homeowner is a huge benefit. And only part of the reason why we're so grateful to have the grants that allow us to do this. So a related area where Empire Justice Center has also advocated for homeowners deals with language access. So as you just heard, Marlene discussed language access. It's part of what we do at Empire Justice Center. And in the area of foreclosure prevention and mortgage work, for example, I recently participated in a virtual meeting with staff members at the CFPB. To learn about and provide feedback regarding updates to CFPB Spanish language housing resources and other matters related to language access. So some of the items that we discussed on that call included additional efforts to do outreach, to apply pressure and provide practical information, tools, and resources to prevent foreclosures and related evictions. We also discussed urging servicers to link their websites to CFPB housing assistance resources such as mortgage relief and forbearance documents in various languages. We discussed recent CFPB guidance related to language access and clarifying to mortgage lenders or servicers that if you do outreach in different languages and provide resources and links to in-language resources, you don't have to provide all the information in language. That's often hesitation from some mortgage providers and servicers that if they do a little, they're gonna have to do everything, and it's cost prohibitive, and they have all these concerns of risks that they may be taking. So it's important to point out that they can do some to at least make their services accessible. We requested that the Bureau remind servicers of their fair lending obligations and explain that they might have risk if they don't offer any information or assistance in language. We recommended that the Bureau translate key documents. For example, there's certain documents about model documents about how to provide notice to homeowners that they may be at risk of foreclosure, and we requested that they translate these into the top 8 languages and encourage servicers to make that available to borrowers in other languages. We recommended that the Bureau have 3 main points in their communications and outreach media, and also perhaps online that could be their focus to kind of get the message across regarding what options homeowners may have after forbearance, and that we requested they do this in 8 different languages. We requested that the CFPB press servicers to make information and assistance available to borrowers immediately because the time is critical. And right now, towards the end of the summer, as different moratoria on evictions and foreclosure processes comes to a close, it's important that the message is out there about options that homeowners may have. And finally, we also shared thoughts about CFPB toolkit that's available for mortgage servicers, mostly emails and tweets that link to the CFPB website that servicers and lenders can use. And they provide information, again, with links in various languages that can be shared with homeowners that are either in forbearance or have foreclosure related issues. You know, the work that we do kind of crosses over. You know, it's not just foreclosure prevention, it's not just language access, it's not just the other issues. They're sometimes interrelated, and it includes work that we do with other agencies, organizations, government groups, and such. So I thank you for allowing me to present to you regarding these important matters.
Thank you, Luis. I have a question for you. Process-wise, you know, you got me. I spent about 10 years in banking, mostly in bank operations, so not retail banking, not mortgage banking, but you know, my prior experience around process design and so on, it just popped up as you were talking about communicating with a borrower that you want to make sure they get information that, hey, your loan is at risk of default, or there's something about to happen, and having to put it in 8 different languages. Is there something on the front end of the process that would make that a little bit less sort of, hey, we're hoping one of these languages get to you, as opposed to where when you have an account that you open up or a mortgage you're originating, that they should have something that says, what is your preferred language, right? So that therefore we know that up front. So it's part of the profile for that customer, right? You know, and so, and again, for something like that to happen, some banks may be doing it already because it's just a good practice. But I almost wonder from a legislation perspective in terms of things that we want to do to protect the customer on the back end, in event that if you have 100 folks that take out a mortgage a day and some percentage may default down the road for a variety of reasons, right? Loss of job, medical costs, that type of thing. It may be good to almost on the front end, right, to have it where every bank or any origination of a mortgage, and actually any kind of banking for that matter, that there should be something up front that says, what is your preferred language, so that it's part of that profile, so that when we're communicating with them, we're able to sort of fine tune it to, what's their sort of native language, just to talk about. Is that something that's come up before, or is that a potential opportunity?
Well, it is certainly a fair lending issue that, you know, if the products are not accessible to customers from all walks of life, you know, there's issues there, problems, legal problems that could arise. I'll say that even with the lenders that we've seen that are, you know, following rules or following best practices and do offer services in various languages, sometimes it's frustrating because the information or how to get that the services in other languages is not right up front. You may have to dig through the websites, or you may have to ask, you know, to find out. And I know certainly there's others on this call. I'm looking at Marlene right now, who I know have been, and Ruhi, I think, has participated as well in some of these searches on bank websites, you know, calls to the 800 numbers available to the, you know, for the banks to try to reach services or offers in Spanish or other languages. And I know we've had mixed experiences with some local and national lenders. I don't know if Marlene or Ruhi want to share any of those experiences with different lenders, but we've compiled some information which we've shared with some national advocacy groups and some of those conversations we've had, and up to and including with the CFPB.
Okay.
Marlene, you can go, but I can also add something.
Go ahead.
So this is Ruhi Maker. My background was also in foreclosure starting 20 years ago, and now I'm very fortunate that we have these amazing advocates. Kevin Purcell, I think, is on our call. He's our supervising attorney. Luis, who's joined us recently, and Jahan Abdurafi is it's one of our paralegals. And I know Marlene's been involved in housing work for a very, very, very long time. But essentially, so the applications are done by Fannie and Freddie, and their supervising agency is FHFA, which I can never remember the Federal Housing Finance Agency.
Mm-hmm.
And essentially, we fought because I did language. I still do some language access work, but I did some of the work that Luis and Marlene are doing. I started doing that again, probably 10 years ago. And we fought to have the language preference in the form. And again, as regulators change and as things change in DC, it swings and roundabouts. So we were getting there. We had spent enormous amount of time advocating. This is again a regulatory change. It's not legislation. And if folks recall, the Supreme Court very recently said that the President Biden could fire the head of Federal Housing Finance Agency. And the day the Supreme Court said that, this was just last month, Mark Calabria was fired because we had worked very closely with them to try and make things happen, and then things changed. So in any event, I'm being told that we have less than 30 minutes. So very quickly, there's a huge group of us fighting for this, and we are now fighting again. And fortunately, some of the advocates who were advocates are now sitting in positions of power and working at HUD. So we are looking forward to working with the advocates who worked with us to make some of these changes happen.
Thank you.
Being told that, yeah, sorry. So
no problem. Thank you, Ruhi. In fact, so two things.
We also have Kirsten Keefe in our Albany office, who's the regional coordinator of our housing program. We have an advocate in Long Island, and we have another advocate. So we essentially have our fingers in many, many pies around housing. So we could have them in more pies, and we will have them in more pies as we get funded to do more work. Perfect. And you'll hear about that sometime in the not so distant future.
Thank you, Ruhi. I really appreciate it. And so we'll and right before we segue, I know I'll send this in effect. I'll make a note of the time on it too as well. We have a couple of key banks here, here in the Rochester area and the CDOs that are involved with equity work. ESL is good, 5-star, you name it. To really sort of have those banks to say, okay, make sure that they're doing the things I just heard you talk about. So and I'm sure they probably are, but if they're not, this could be an opportunity for them to make sure they're doing those type of things.
So before Barb starts, we essentially have comment letters to many of the local banks, and not just, but the larger banks, where we tell them in great detail what it is we want them to do, and we meet with them. And again, that's something we've been doing for 30 years. But yes, these are all things we've raised. So I'm going to let Barb. So can Barb and I both be on now, because we're
you sure can. I'll spotlight both of you so you guys can start. Yep.
Hi, everyone. I'm Barb VanKerkhove. And so Ruhi and I are going to talk a little bit about the work we do using the federal law, the Community Reinvestment Act, to try to address what we see as, segregation in housing, and also disparities in lending and investing in our communities. And I'm going to start a little bit about just a very quick history of what led to the Community Reinvestment Act and how we use it. So I'm guessing that many of you have seen, if you've been following Kevin's webinars here, you've seen a homeowners loan corporation map of Rochester, New York. That was a federal agency that was set up in 1933 to try to, at the height of the Depression, to try to address the ability of people to buy homes and to refinance distressed mortgages. But in doing that, they introduced redlining. And so then, to try to address it, first there was, in 1975, there was the Home Mortgage Disclosure Act, which allowed required banks and mortgage lenders to report to the government the mortgages that they were making. And once we saw where they were being made and to whom they were being made and then not being made, Congress realized that we needed legislation, and then they passed the Community Reinvestment Act in 1977, which was to address race-based redlining in our communities. But the law does not say anything about race. It only says that banks need to serve their whole communities in which they're located, including low and moderate income communities. So it's really income based, but I'm a data geek, and let me tell you, they're very correlated. Racial disparities and economic disparities are very highly correlated because of the way that this country's been set up. And so we use that law to, with the coalition that we've set up locally. Ruhi was one of the co-founders of the coalition, along with Melissa Marquez, who is the CEO of the Genesee Co-op Federal Credit Union, which is the only community development credit union in the Rochester area. They set up the Greater Rochester Community Reinvestment Coalition to start using the publicly available mortgage lending data to look at where banks were lending and not lending in the city of Rochester. That's where it started. We've expanded it to the whole Rochester MSA. We look at lending to low and moderate income families, to low and moderate income census tracts that have a high percentage of low and moderate income families, to Black and Brown borrowers, and to census tracts that have a high proportion of minority families living in them. And so the Community Reinvestment Act actually says that communities have an opportunity for input, and when a bank undergoes an exam by a federal regulator to see if it's actually serving the communities, the regulators are supposed to seek the input of the community. So that's what we do. We interact with the bank and the regulators, saying this is where we see a bank serving a community and where we see the bank not serving communities and opportunities for improvement. And we do that with data around mortgage lending, and there's also publicly available small business lending data, although it's not really as good. We still use that to say, banks, here's some opportunities for you to lend to businesses. And we provide comments when they undergo their exam, which I just spoke about, but also a really great opportunity is when a bank is proposing a merger to either be acquired by a bank or to acquire another bank. We then have an opportunity to comment then as well, which we did when Key Bank bought First Niagara Bank several years ago. We were very involved with a bunch of coalitions across the country, and it was sort of facilitated by the National Community Reinvestment Coalition. And we were able to develop a community benefits agreement with Key Bank to say, this is how we commit to serving communities after the merger. And so now we're working with Key Bank to make sure that they're actually keeping their commitment under that. And then also when branches are being closed in low and moderate income census tracts, communities also have an opportunity to comment there, although it's very limited and we usually aren't really super successful. I don't think we've ever had a branch not close based on our advocacy, but we have had branches like sold maybe for a very nominal amount to like a credit union or to a not-for-profit or something like that to be used.
Can I sneak in a
Yep,
real
go
quick
ahead,
question?
Kevin.
I want to sneak in a quick question because you touched on something that's I really noticed. I left Rochester for 10 years and came back 4 years ago. So from 06 to 16. And I noticed a complete change in the footprint for banks in the Rochester City area. So there's a number of unbanked areas. Now, we certainly have more credit union presence than I saw before. But so is that an example of where our ability to really, to say, hey, you can't close all of these centers, because if you do, it's going to create almost like a banking desert. And so is that one of those examples where it was difficult to stop that from happening?
Yes, it's just really difficult. There's very limited ways that you, in a very limited amount of time, that you can comment on that with the bank. So, the other way we try to do it is through their exams too, is say, look, this bank has closed this many branches, we don't think they should get a good grade because they aren't really serving our community anymore. And they've closed whatever 2 branches in low and moderate income neighborhoods. We might say that as well. Right. And it's hard, right? So the other way we try to do it is like when banks are starting to come into like Monroe County from other parts of the MSA, like when 5 Star started coming in, then we started working with 5 Star as it grew its footprint to say this, we want to make sure that you're with your 2 branches in the city, that you're actually serving a good amount of the city population, including people from the traditionally underserved neighborhoods. And they were open with us. They actually gave us some good, interesting maps to say this is where the customers were coming from that went to the 2 city branches. So we're really good, I think, at really like building relationships with banks and working with them in that way. And at the same time, sort of like, sort of the carrot and stick approach, building relationships, but then allows us then to speak honestly with a bank.
Excellent.
So
very cool. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah. And then I'm not going to go over this slide a whole heck of a lot, but so again, data drives our analysis, along with, that's the quantitative part of it, but the qualitative part of it is through our coalition partners, what they're seeing on the ground and what they're seeing as needs in the community. That's more like the qualitative part that we share at meetings with the banks and regulators, and also in our comment letters. And then a bank can choose from that menu of ideas that we've given them on how they want to invest in our community. And we want to say, so then banks might say they invest, a couple of $1 billion in the Rochester MSA over an exam period. Well, banks might have much more higher deposits that they're getting from the people living in our community. And so we want to know, well, okay, what's the dollar amount per the dollar of deposit that you're investing in our community?
Yeah.
And so I've worked out a way, and this methodology describes it, so that then we can compare different banks to each other to see how much they're reinvesting in our community. And right now, I just looked up, M&T now is the largest depositor in the MSA. They have 20% of our community's deposits.
Okay.
And then Key Bank is now actually our 2nd largest deposit holder in the Rochester MSA, quickly followed by JP Morgan Chase. So those are the 3 top depositories in banks. And one thing I want to just say is the Community Reinvestment Act is an amazing tool. The one thing that it's limited application, it only applies to banks, and it only applies to banks that have physical branches in your community. So it doesn't apply to credit unions. It doesn't apply to insurance companies. It doesn't apply to mortgage lenders that are just mortgage lenders. And it doesn't apply to banks that don't have a branch in your community. So like Wells Fargo, even though it has branches in other areas, it's a pretty big mortgage lender in the Rochester community, but it doesn't have any CRA obligations in our community.
Interesting. So how do we fix that? That's a good example, right?
That's total like advocacy at the federal level. We've been doing it for years, trying to advocate with regulations, mostly just because the climate in Congress, it's very hard to try to expand the actual law. So we're really doing it regulatory wise.
Gotcha. Because there's such an aversion.
We've been working on CRA modernization for 20 years, because the financial landscape has changed. And
so Ruhi, you're next.
Okay, I'm next.
All right. Thank you, Barb.
Again, I'm going to just, given that we're done in 10 minutes, I'm just, there's a longer presentation. This is a longer presentation that I did before the Monroe County Bar Association, and that's also on YouTube. So we can definitely figure out a way to get it to people. But
Okay.
I'm going to go really fast through this particular slide. We're trying to preserve home ownership. We're trying to create home ownership. And so some of the things, this is how we started with the banks. We mapped data in the 90s, and we showed that low income white homeowners who at that time were in the northwest of the city, at that time, the northwest of the city of Rochester was much more white. Low income white homeowners had 4 times the home ownership rate of Black homeowners, which were in the southwest of the city, who were moderate income. So a lower income white person was 4 times more likely to get a mortgage than a moderate income Black homeowner, borrower. So that was like our first lot of maps, and we started meeting with the banks. We started, commenting all of these comments that we've done. We've been working on the foreclosure crisis since the 90s. We started looking at subprime lending in the 90s. And we ended up creating.
Ruhi, I just want you to know, feel free if you need to go a little bit further, as long as you're okay time-wise. I would say this information is so crucial. I'm okay if it goes over. So I answer to me around the time frame. So as long as you're okay with it, okay? All right, thank you. Go ahead.
So we essentially say to the banks, you have a portfolio product. What that means is that it's a loan that the bank will hold, and they can underwrite the mortgage in a slightly different way. They can have lower credit scores, and they can have a down payment and closing cost assistance program. So if you're a renter, spending $1,000 a month on rent, not making enough money to save to become a homeowner, the down payment assistance helps. You can get credit repair working with one of the not-for-profit agencies, etc., and become a homeowner, because that same home that you're paying $1,000 in rent for is probably going to be your principal, interest, taxes, and insurance are probably going to be $500. So there was a little quote. Sorry, I got to just drink some water. So we get folks into home ownership using CRA, and then of course the predatory lenders come in. They target Black and brown communities. People have fixed rate mortgages, and they come in and they say, let's lower your payment, and they give them adjustable rate mortgages, resulting in predatory loans and folks losing equity, which is how we got into subprime lending. So moving forward.
So I would just want to emphasize what Ruhi said. So those mortgages that homeowners were originally put in were affordable mortgages that they could afford and make their monthly payments on. CRA was not causing people to default on their mortgages. Right, Ruhi?
Yeah. So that's and that's still said. I mean, they still say we should abolish CRA because CRA makes loans go bad. That was never the case. So again, we have lots of information in writing on all of these things. Barbara does great comment letters, and at least of the 6 banks that are in town, we have 50-page long comment letters, and you can read about everything that bank does or doesn't do. So 2 facts. I mean, everyone knows COVID disparately impacted brown and Black folk. And so March 2021, this is recent data, the Federal Reserve says, hey, what's going on? Let's look at how people are doing. And of course, many more Black and brown people are doing worse off financially than white households. Now, this is really critical information about it. So city households of 53 to 75% in majority non-white zip codes have subprime credit. And we'll talk about why this is relevant in the next slide. But essentially, when you look at data at the county level or the MSA level, Rochester can look great. When you go down to the census tract level, the zip code level, in Black and brown neighborhoods, our families are hurting, our households are hurting. So what's happening? Essentially, you can't tell someone, why don't you do a good financial budget and save to become a homeowner? For the extremely simple reason that we do not pay our families a living wage. We do not pay people enough to pay for rent, childcare, health insurance, education. It's not possible for people making a minimum wage to pay all of their bills on time. It just isn't possible, which is why this child tax credit is such a huge thing. And that's going to hopefully help folks a lot. So what happens is you're always behind on something, and you end up with a low credit score, and the credit score leads to what credit you're going to get. So if you're a prime credit score, you're going to get a really good interest rate. You're going to maybe buy your 0% car at a 0% loan, or you're going to get a 3% mortgage. What gets extremely complicated is that once you do not have good credit, and it's not that you're profligate or you're not saving, you're working 2-3 jobs and you still don't have good credit because you couldn't pay your bills on time, because you just don't make enough money because incomes have not kept up. So sorry, can we go back to the last slide? I know she's moving me forward. So basically the most important thing to understand is that you are in the regulated market, you have prime credit, you're in the regulated market. When you move to subprime credit, banks don't have products for you. You then go into the unregulated market. And I know this isn't going to make sense and we can explain this, but loans that are designed to fail at double and triple digit interest still make money for finance companies who set things up and design things to fail. And again, we can, we have reports on this, and that's where the world we're living in right now. Every time a client has come to me, and I recently talked to 3 people with car loans, they blame themselves, not realizing that they've been, taken advantage of, ripped off. So, we worked with the CFPB, we've worked with the New York AG's office for a long time, and we will continue to do that, because when there are these back products, they're accompanied by what are called arbitration clauses. So we can't sue people. Only the Attorney General can subpoena information and figure out if there's disparate pricing going on. And there's a lot of disparate pricing going on. If you walk in with a brown skin or black skin, you will be charged more than if you walk in with white skin. And again, this is something we're working on, and I'm hoping to be able to share more about it as things become public. So I'll move to the next slide.
Hey, Ruhi, I actually think that we may end up having a dedicated discussion or show just about that component you mentioned, and I'll tell you why. So I know in my 10 years I was in banking, one thing that really, I'll never forget, it was a very powerful moment for me, that there was a wave throughout the banks that were starting to change the terms of agreement for accounts, and where it was defaulting to where you couldn't sue, that you had to choose arbitration. And I'll never forget it. And in fact, it was a bank out of Pittsburgh that I was in, and we're in this large meeting, and they were just rolling it out. And I just remember I was relatively new to the bank, and I thought, that's interesting. We're going to be changing a pretty critical component for a customer. And what they were going to do is just add it to the back of the statement. It wasn't going to be a separate note. It was going to just be added to the back of the statement, which, by the way, we had moved to electronic statements, which people weren't downloading. And in it, it said, if you saw this and you wanted to maintain your ability to sue, you had to send in, it was this complicated, convoluted process. And oh, by the way, it had to be notarized and sent to this specific address. If you didn't do it in 30 days, or it wasn't even that long, that you were defaulted to lose your ability to sue the bank if there was a problem. And I just remember raising my hand in that meeting and saying, this is a critical loss of a right for a customer. This should be a separate letter mailed to everyone, and inside it a card, pre-addressed, pre-stamped, that says, if you want to be able to maintain it, just drop this in the mail and go from there. And they it was not accepted. And so all of our customers lost their right to sue if they didn't pick up on this change that was never really fully notified. And other banks were doing the same thing. And so I would imagine these non-regulated loans that you're talking about, those companies are probably defaulting to that sort of arbitration, so that
That's
if something
exactly right.
happens, then they can't seek legal recourse.
And they choose the arbitrators. It isn't that there's independent arbiter. Yeah, we know lots of horrible things happening But we can't, Kristi talked about what we do, impact litigation.
Right.
It's a class action, and you can't file, you can't sue. And it's so hard to tell people you got really, really ripped off and cheated, but only the attorney general can go after this company for what they did to you. And that's what we do. They came to town and we all sat around and we said, okay, here's what's going on. Are you going to go after those folks? So, stay tuned, shall we say.
All right, thank
Now
you.
it's Barb's slide.
All right, thank you. Go ahead, Barb. Thank you, Ruhi.
Yeah, so we're going to just talk about some of the a couple of sectors and what they can do to address structural racism. But everybody has a role in trying to address structural racism. So what nonprofits can do, what for-profit corporations can do, what banks can do, and then in the public sector, what state and federal policymakers can do, what local municipalities can do, and then what the legal community can do. We have other, information on all of these sectors, but we're just going to touch on a couple of them. Next slide, please. So the private sector. So first of all, nonprofits can commit to fixing gaps in education, income, and wealth with very targeted programs. So how they target their programs, really like through an equity lens, that's really important. And then CEOs of for-profit, and I would even say all entities, right? They have to commit to anti-racist training so that all of their employees understand the economic costs of structural racism, and so externally and internally, corporations, nonprofits, banks can work to address structural racism, create equity, but also change the culture of their workplaces as well, so that when number 3 happens, they can that they hire more staff that reflects the communities they serve. Those staff then want to stay there and feel welcomed and cared for within that organization, and then everybody can work together to address the systemic issues externally.
That's really
And next
powerful.
slide.
Those are some good best practices. Thank you.
So Ruhi, I think this is you, right?
Sorry. Yeah. So, this is a very long conversation all on its own. And essentially, we've been working on safe and affordable owner-occupied and rental housing through the work we do through Greater Rochester Community Reinvestment Coalition. They essentially, many banks have community development lending and investments. They have low-income housing tax credits, and we have many amazing not-for-profits in Rochester that do owner-occupied and rental housing. But many people, Kevin, I don't have to explain to Kevin, what happens when you say we want affordable housing, not just in the city, but we want to move it to the suburbs, and affordable family housing. And so we can desegregate the county. Again, something we've been working on for I've been personally working on, in the 90s, I was working on this. We came up with this huge, under Mayor Bill Johnson and Commissioner Argus, we had this huge initiative on desegregation, which, as I'm sure folks know, never got anywhere. So we essentially, the only way to do affordable housing in the suburbs is we need subsidies. It's not possible to make affordable housing anywhere without subsidies at the state and federal level. And one of the things that folks may or may not know, but one of the proposals President Biden has, is that they will give money for affordable housing if municipalities, towns are willing to make zoning changes. So, we're starting to think about that. We don't know what's going to pass. There was a deal in the middle of the night last night. We don't know what it's going to look like. And essentially, this gets very complicated because people who live in communities get very angry when you talk about, we can't do single family rental or homeowner occupied housing anymore. It is bad for our climate. And we need to start allowing seniors, families, elders, young people to live in low-rise multifamily housing. I'm a housing lawyer. I've been in virtually all the subsidized housing in Rochester, all over town, and including the suburbs. I've been inside, Rochester Housing Authority houses, both high rise, low rise. So I completely understand that old stigma of public housing, but it is extremely possible to have safe and affordable housing, which I would want right next door to me. And I would want, if I had a family member who was who qualified for it, I would want that person to live there. We have to make that happen. It's a big fight. It's big fight all over the country, including in progressive states. So we essentially have to pass zoning change. And again, stay tuned, because I'm thinking about that, and we're all thinking about that, and we may be able to make some things happen. And let's see what happens. I know, Kevin, you've been leading the charge, so I will, that's a long offline conversation. Let's put it this way.
Well, what I can share with you, Ruhi, is that how much things have changed. So my office is my elected office for 4 years. I'm actually wrapping up my last year. In 2019, when we're updating our comprehensive plan for Pittsford, I was successful in getting everyone to support a statement that we would aspire to be a town that's more welcoming and inclusive for all who live, work, learn, and visit Pittsford. However, when we got to the section around how do we actually do that, I put together an amendment that would have addressed young people, young families, seniors on a fixed income by saying that we wanted to, and the statement was pretty broad. It was to say we wanted to be able to work with the landowners for land that's approved to be built on, and developers in the town to come up with more inclusionary zoning laws that would allow for instruments like patio homes, townhomes, condos, apartments, targeting per household incomes between 40 and 90, which is, again, I'd like it to be lower, but because of the overall cost in Pittsford's land, 40 to 90 was what looked feasibly like could work. And that would mean you would have, more properties on a given acre, whereas our exclusionary zoning laws was 1 house per acre, which was intentionally done back in the 60s to keep it outside of the price of African Americans when they could no longer use deed and covenant restrictions to keep them out. So those are on the books today, but it's now called Keeping the Character of Pittsford. And that wasn't the initial intent. So when I started to educate as many people as I could, and I held community sessions, and we talked about the color of law and how segregation was, de jure and not de facto, it was picking up some steam, but I was a little early because I got to tell you, I ended up with death threats against myself and my family. They took our house address, put it on social media, and then it was a group of people, about 6-7 people that were hardcore in this. Another one then posted a video next to our address that said change agents should be shot, killed, or assassinated. So it was frightening because at the end of the day, I thought, oh my God, it's okay if you disagree with my policy, but to actually put that out there, which somebody who is maybe not right in your mind may decide I got a new mission. And we knew that we had white supremacists trying to move into the area because they were putting out recruitment leaflets. So I had to have a police protection on our street, in front of our home, for a period of about a month or so until the 2019 elections, when things sort of backed off. Very simply because I wanted to have a statement in our comp plan that says, if we really believe we want to be more inclusive, it should be for the whole human race, not just for some. And so that's 2019. Fast forward, so I lost the vote. Our town supervisor, in fact, was 100% against this because he's comfortable, and by his own admission to me, that with the level of diversity that Pittsford has, he liked the fact that there was only 1.5% African American Hispanics in Pittsford. He didn't want that to change. I found that offensive, but I appreciated his honesty. But what that also meant was that he could not support my amendment. And this was a time when we didn't have the majority. So I lost a vote, but here's what's happened since then. Because of that educational campaign, there's more people in Pittsford today that understand what inclusionary zoning laws are. What were its roots? What was its intention? And how if you really want to be an anti-racist today, what you have to do is to say, I no longer support that. We actually have that support now today. I don't know how big it is yet, but I got to tell you, we're now revamping our zoning laws. And the general discussion is we cannot continue exclusionary zoning laws. We just can't. We have 4 or 5 neighbors already started with that. Homes started $500,000, which those neighbors are almost exclusively white. And there's a little bit of diversity in there for people who are faculty members and attorneys and programmers, that type of thing. But by and large, those neighbors are completely devoid of most African American Hispanics. And so my hope is that even though we lost a fight 2 years ago, I would say right now there's an awareness that says you cannot stand up for equity if you're allowing this to continue. And so I'm optimistic right now that, in fact, I'm letting other people lead the charge, because when I led it, the folks would say, oh, he's Black, he's just trying to bring more Black people in. I'm like, no, I actually want more of America to be able to live here, because being exclusive is not something to be proud of, it's something to be ashamed of. Being inclusionary is what we want to be. You can't claim to be diverse and inclusive in what we want, but then don't do the work to allow it to actually happen. So I have to tell you, things are starting to change, but we're not there yet. But thankfully, not having to have police protection when we talk about inclusionary zoning laws feels like progress.
No, I mean, I used to be racially profiled when I first came to Rochester, when I went to a Pittsford store. So, I mean, there was a store. I mean, it's, I would never dream of living in Pittsford, frankly. I'll be really blunt,
Well, I could understand. I mean, we have a long ways to go. I feel like we've made a lot of progress in the 4 years I've been on the board, but I believe we have a long way to go. Our school system, that's a whole different subject altogether, is still struggling with just hiring, teachers, African American, Hispanic teachers, and then we're starting to hear about critical race theory and all those sorts of things. But I think, but I tell you, I am so moved by all this information you guys share. I don't know if you're done. Do you have a couple more stuff, or?
Yeah, I think I have quickly.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. So, and I think, I don't know, folks saw on social media, there were at Penfield School District, a lot of the parents turned out supporting the teaching of racism to their students. And then Brighton, a lot of parents turned out to support one of the, I am very, very careful with all these things being recorded right now, what I say. I mean, this is Ruhi censored, very, very, very censored. As those of you who know me uncensored know. So, but yeah, no, this is, it's like you ask, how long will it take? And I'll say next year or 20 years after I die. But, we just keep doing the work day after day after day. You're not attached to the outcome. You do the right thing. You just keep doing it. And that's what I'm saying to folks who are doing racial justice. I mean, I've been a public interest lawyer for 40 years. If you want to do racial justice work, plan to do it, set it up so your children or your grandchildren or your young friends you have will continue it after you. And it's fine. It's not a, but we need white people to stand up and just have our backs, and as I say, I'm really, Barb's here. I would not be doing this work without her. There's no way. I would have had to have retired. And Kristi Hughes is, these are people who they have my back, and they're I know people don't like the word ally, but boy, I'm going to start crying when I talk about how much they have meant to me and how much they have done for me, because being a public interest lawyer and doing a racial justice lawyer for 40 years is really, really hard, so I'm going to stop there.
Well, I really appreciate that. I tell you, I think, in fact, this first bullet you have here that says stop blaming people for their poverty. That is so powerful, right? Because to me, the mechanism to help address poverty is in the hands of many of the folks that are in position of power in an agency, right? I mean, something as simple as a $15 an hour wage that is now becoming attractive, right? More companies are moving towards it. There's no reason why that couldn't have happened earlier. Mm-hmm. And the reason being, it isn't. I mean, from a pure business perspective, as an operations person who knows how to manage budgets and so on, there's no reason we couldn't have done that earlier. And so, and the problem is when we don't do it, then on the other side of the equation, we complain that social safety nets are a ballooning, right? And so you can't have your cake and eat it too. And what's really missing is something that was solved years ago when Ford company was getting started, he paid $5 an hour, or $5 a day to his employees. That sounds like a small amount, but back then it was huge. And his logic was simple. I want to create the middle class I need to buy my cars we're making. And so we've missed that whole point, that we have this growing poverty base, which used to be part of the middle class. And so but a lot of that income has gone so far to the top end that, any company that has people that's making over $1 million, you got to ask yourself, if you're not paying a livable wage on the front end, you need to fix that before you start paying more people on the high end. Because if you do that, you'll have more stable employment, better productivity, long-term loyalty. People can actually have good quality of life. You can address poverty issues. So when you go to church, you're not praying for people that when you go to work, you're reinforcing that they stay in poverty. So to me, this is very, very fixable. And to Ruhi, to your point, this is everybody's work. This is a humanity issue. It's not a racial issue. We've made it a racial issue because structurally we've segregated and oppressed entire parts of the human race because of the history of our country. And I think that I sense that we're going through a sort of a racial reckoning to realize right now that this problem that we've been ignoring, and because we set it up in such a way that the people that live in the suburbs don't have to see the oppression that's being created, then it's really just on TV. It's a caricature. But if we were living close to each other, and they saw a parent sees another child of another parent, and realizing that child has hopes and dreams just like theirs, and by no means should we go to sleep at night feeling comfortable when we know there's another parent whose child is not comfortable. And until that's right, we really shouldn't be living our best lives at the expense of other people when the mechanism to address it is right in front of us. And that's part of one of the things that sort of motivates me, is that I know what it feels like to be poor, because I came to this country with absolutely nothing, a suitcase and clothes. And I've never forgot that feeling. So therefore, one of the things I see as a huge responsibility for me as an individual, and what is my cup in this change, is to use my position, power, and agency that has grown over time to really be an advocate for change, to be an advocate for equity, and to make sure that the people that are in my sphere today are more uncomfortable now than they've ever been. And it's because I want them to be uncomfortable, because I want them to join me in this fight. There's not one white person in my life today that doesn't know that despite my role, despite the jobs I have, despite where they even see where I live, doesn't mean that we get to forget about where either we come from, or the fact that as a person of color, you still face some of those things today. I mean, the things that that we need to address in our community today, it's everybody's business. And my hope is that we can do so with a spirit of humility, grace, and forgiveness. And this is about us being able to figure out how to make sure that this work, if it's spread out to everyone, to your point, Ruhi, it's actually much easier, because it can't be on the shoulders of the very folks that are being oppressed. It doesn't make sense. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Very cool. All right. So does any and I want to make sure I got to take the spotlights off so we can see everybody, because I think by doing spotlight we can't see everyone. So I'm going to remove spotlight so then everybody can show. And let me see. So I think I got rid of all. No, I think Barb, you're still on. Okay, remove the spotlight.
And Kristi too.
Okay.
Kristi's on. I can see her.
Okay, can we see everyone here?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. So actually, I think I still got you spotlighted there, Kristi. Did I do that right? Spotlight for everyone. Nope. Okay, I think we're all set. So I want to, in closing, is any closing remarks, anything that anybody would like to share before we close out? And I know we went over, but I thank you for being patient. The nice thing is we have the flexibility. There's no nobody putting pressure on me to go like, oh, gotta shut off and move to the next program. But this was such an important topic. And I already see a couple of things I'd like to, as I watch this again several times, and I'll take a couple of actions off of it. I want you to know you're welcome to come back and focus on any one of the things we talked about today. So just let me know, we schedule it and we make it happen. I want to literally, here's my goal. I want to be able to randomly approach somebody on the street and to say, have you heard of the Empire Justice Center? And I want them to say, oh yeah, I do. What do they do? And I want them to be able to tell me. So I want you guys to be essentially in the hearts and minds of everyone, whether it's your target audience are the people that can use help or people that know someone who needs help. And so, I want to be a good advocate of understanding what you guys all do, so I can be an advocate in every space that I occupy. And I want to do the same thing for other people that are watching this today. So any sort of closing remarks, anything you guys would like to share?
So Kristi,
I just
mean,
want to
we have
say
a
thank you.
robust Facebook page. We have a website, there we have a
do,
policy.
yes.
You want to talk about the policy newsletter that comes out every month, I think?
Yes, we do have a monthly policy matters newsletter that is just a wonderful informational newsletter. It's not just about Rochester, it's about, work across the state, but a lot of it affects everyone. You can go to our website, you can sign up for that newsletter, or you can email me directly, I think, or any of us directly if our information is on the slides. But that's a regular communication that we send out.
Right. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a couple of links on the things we talked about or anything you send to me, and I'm going to put that in the comments section of the video after I go through and edit it and make it, take out some of the early parts of, so it makes it a little bit shorter. And then things that have specific timestamps that says, hey, at time 36 or time 46, there's certain subjects so people can dive into what they want to as well. So if there's any links or things you want me to put there, just email it to me and I'll go ahead and put that on. And then again, a couple of things that may want us to come back. I'd love to talk about the predatory lending, because I believe that's so for example, I think the more we can educate people to know when they're about to enter into predatory lending is really important, because then it would at least empower them up front to say, no, I want to retain my ability to, I don't want arbitration. Because if people understand that, it may make folks less likely to want to do that, because they know that they have an easy out by going to arbitration if they've harmed someone. And something I have to tell you that really is kind of, I'm looking at the world now through sort of an equity lens, and what I find fascinating is that, and you touched on it in one of those slides, so we don't pay a livable wage, so people can barely make ends meet. So they can't pay all their bills on time. That leads to a lower credit score. And then when they apply for anything, they get a higher interest rate, which makes it even harder for them to make that bill.
Or they can't rent. I mean, now you can't even rent with a bad credit score. Your insurance rate goes up. I mean, it's just like, the lenders destroy your credit and then say, well, now try and succeed. But it's gotten so much worse.
Yeah, there's something
to be like this.
It's patently wrong on so many different levels. So the question is that how do we start looking at that from a systemic perspective to say at the end of the day, who decided to do, because essentially the concept of what I just described to you is entrenched in taking advantage of the poor. It's entrenched in continuing to oppress people that are already oppressed. Yeah. So that whoever decided clearly, and also benefiting from it, right? So not just to hurt, but to benefit, right? And that doesn't make any sense, because all it's doing from a societal perspective is making it much harder for us to overcome basic things like overcoming poverty. It's basically anchoring people into poverty in a way that doesn't make sense. So I believe continued conversation around that could be helpful, because then it'll help folks to realize that high interest rates, people, that don't understand it will say, well, hey, you're supposed to pay it higher if you don't pay your bills. Well, have we thought about how do we even get there? What are the steps before that?
And that would be sort of, not only educating individuals on how to navigate the current system, but educating folks on how to advocate for changes to the system.
Absolutely.
I think we need to talk about that. Yeah.
The interest rates are not proportionate to the risk. So if you qualify for 10 or 12%, those loans don't exist at the banks. Instead, you go to 24.99%. And if you're Black or brown, you're much, and Melissa's
more
talking
likely
about
to get to that.
It isn't just that it's basically stocks and companies and that are rich and serving the rich are getting rich on the backs of the poorest of the poor. I mean, that's what's, including us. We get free bank accounts. We get 0% financing or 3% financing because the money is being made on the person making $15 an hour. I mean, we could go on and on about this. As I said, we have, for 6 of the banks, we have long letters describing what they do and what they don't do. And well, obviously we have to figure out, how you can Google it on our website, but we can also send stuff, or certainly the latest bank letter, and I will say that the local bank executives, who I won't name, but the ones who live in Rochester, ESL, MNT, Canandaigua, and 5 Star, they are real. I say to them, if our poor people fail, if so many people are in poverty, it'll bring your bank down. Now, I've been saying that for 30 years, but now they actually believe me and listen to me. And, and there's a lot of work to do. And so one of the things we're going to say to them, we want to know every dollar that is going to Black people, every dollar that's going to Latinx people, every dollar that's going to, when you do your Community Reinvestment Act work, we want to break out by race of all the different programs and all the different, they're not obliged to do that. But that's going to be my September job, convincing the CEO to give me that data by race, and having them look at that data by race, right? Because you would not believe how many programs are designed, and because of systemic racism, Black and brown people don't have access to them.
Yeah,
that's how I started. I mean, that's how I started the work I do now. It's just I analyzed and said, oh, it's all going to white neighborhoods. Oh, it's all going to white neighborhoods. And I'm not saying it shouldn't go to white neighborhoods, but it should also go to Black and brown neighborhoods, Well, and people aren't used to thinking like that. And I know we've gone way over time, and thank you for
No, thank you. I tell you that your passion around that is so evident. I really appreciate it, because this work needs that kind of passion to make it happen. And so I feel like you've really educated me today. I want to educate myself more. So again, I just want to leave it out there. At any point you ever want to come back to focus on either one subject or more than one, you name it, just tell me and we'll set it up and go from there. But I want to thank all of you for being here today and educating everyone that's listening. I'm going to ask you, when I'm done getting it all sort of fixed up, I'll send it out to you, and then ask you to share it in your respective networks. And, to me, this is really important. If you're listening today, Empire Justice Center, it's empirejustice.org, I think.
Yes, I put it in the chat.
You did? Okay, empirejustice.org. And so please get a hold of them. And, and I would just say, to me, if you're not sure, still call. Why? Because they might be able to help you in one way, shape, or form. And I want to thank you all here today. And for the folks that had to leave early, please let them know how much I deeply appreciate what they shared. And I just appreciate your agency and what you're doing with it.
Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you for the opportunity.
All right. Take care, guys.
Bye-bye.
Okay. All right. Take care. Okay, well, before I end the stream, I just wanted to close out with a few closing comments. I just want to thank you for listening today. This was a lot of information to share. I know we went over about 29 minutes, but that's the nice thing. It's going to be on YouTube. So I know a number of you had to leave at 1 o'clock, but you can come back and listen to it. Now, I have to go through and edit the video, take out some of the first parts when I'm doing my initial sort of house cleaning to get the live stream up and running. Also going to be adding some links in the description. And then after that, I'll then start sharing it both on LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook. And so I'd encourage you to do the same. If you like this video, click subscribe, click that little bell thing. I can't believe I'm saying that because I've done this to listen to other people's sites. But I just want you to share this with as much people as you can, particularly if you're in the Rochester area. Because and share it with the agencies you work with, share it with church groups, share it with your pastor, then ask your pastor to share it to his or her parishioners. This is extremely important. If you're listening to this and you like the content of this work, please get a hold of me. It's kevin.beckford at rochester.edu. That's my U of R, Kevin, KEVIN.BECKFORD rochester.edu. And so, if you have any questions around our community engagement work we're doing in the Rochester community through the U of R, I'm happy to help with that. And from a funding perspective, I don't have a budget today. As I shared with you during COVID, most of the budget that I had is gone. So therefore, I'm doing this work on my own here with that. And so I could really use if somebody's interested in sponsoring, to pay for something like an ASL interpretation, so that I can have someone with providing ASL for these 2 programs a month. That would be wonderful. I'd really appreciate it. And look forward to hearing from you. My phone number is 485-0465, 585-485-0465. That's 585-485-0465. If you need to get a hold of me, and it's Kevin Beckford. Thank you again for being with us today.